Puts me so much trouble, it's not my fault. All this, I also lose my friends, I lost my baby. That is looking crack, only today want to change. He wanted us, so the cougar try more like to feel. I'd kill the real, take your life in a second. The table drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned. Eating every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep with it for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now I'm not afraid of anything. Cause they're gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try to wear your skin of everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. Alone every day, it is a praise of pleasure.
Good morning and welcome to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free. On today's episode, we're going to be going over the NFL news from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Then we're going to talk about Josh Jacobs' situation on the Oakland Raiders and discuss what I thought of Josh Jacobs as a prospect and give you a verdict on where he should be selected in your rookie drafts. In NFL news, linebacker Anthony Barr of the Minnesota Vikings will remain at linebacker. There was some speculation that he would move to defensive end, which would be intriguing with Danielle Hunter becoming what looks like an elite pass rusher last season. Since he's staying at linebacker, his IDP value is largely unchanged and not very high. Joey Bosa, defensive end for the Chargers, says that he still has foot soreness. This doesn't surprise me, as I had reconstructive foot surgery over a year ago now, and it still affects my day-to-day life pretty significantly. Now, I'm not training at an NFL level, but I don't think most people realize how much actual force is distributed in your feet and how much that can affect your entire body. Bosa's been hurt a lot throughout his career. Hopefully he can improve on that, but it seems to be more of an injury-prone thing than a work ethic issue. When healthy, of course, he's going to be one of the better defensive ends that you can trot out in your IDP lineup. Jared Cook, the tight end for the Saints, got some praise from Drew Brees, saying that he's certainly been impressed with Jared Cook. Not surprising based on how he looked last season. I do think he'll be productive this year, but the Saints offense has been moving to more of a run-first approach. They haven't had a tight end that's pretty much worth anything for a few years now, and I do think that changes with Jared Cook in New Orleans. But at 32 and with a lackluster career until last season, it's uncertain how long this stretch will last. If I owned him and had tight end depth, I would be waiting for a monster game or two during the year and trading for either a younger tight end that hasn't started producing yet or draft picks. Apparently, N'Keal Harry has been lining up at multiple spots during the Patriots OTAs and has also played punt returner. A lot of this camp hype is hard to really draw conclusions from at this point of the season when it's just OTAs, but Bill Belichick said that he is smart, which is a very good sign and honestly makes me feel better about N'Keal Harry than I did before reading this news blurb. Bill Belichick doesn't hand out praise often, and I doubt he calls players smart very often. There's been a lot of news about Allen Hurns, the wide receiver for the Cowboys, who dislocated his ankle and broke his leg in the playoffs last year. He's most likely not dynasty or fantasy relevant at this point in his career, and if you haven't already dropped him, you probably should now. He's going to be 28 years old this season in a low-volume passing offense, coming back from a pretty gruesome injury. Seahawks wide receiver Jerron Brown has been practicing with the first team at OTAs. This is one of those classic news stories that isn't a news story. Of course, a veteran receiver that knows the offense is going to be on the first team during OTAs. It would be ridiculous if he wasn't. They can't just throw a bunch of rookies out there that don't know the plays and then try to maximize their reps during practice. Jerron Brown has really shown nothing in his career that's special. Don't go pick him up. Completely disregard this news. He'll soon be relegated lower on the depth chart. Another non-news story is the Jaguars offensive coordinator saying that Leonard Fournette is going to have a major role in the offense. I mean, no shit. I don't think anyone on planet Earth was thinking otherwise. But of course, he does have to stay healthy. That's been his biggest drawback so far in the NFL, outside of his off-the-field decisions. So this is just one of those news stories that if your value of Fournette increased from this, it shouldn't have. Another story that's getting blown up way out of proportion is that the Steelers have experimented using two-back formations in their OTAs. I think most people figured they would find more ways to put Jalen Samuels on the field as a receiver. With the departure of Antonio Brown, Samuels will most likely have standalone value this year, although James Conner is the lead back, and that's probably not going to change outside of an injury. It would be highly shocking if Conner still didn't get workhorse-level touches. Maybe not quite to the extent last year because they didn't know what they had with Samuels. Maybe a few less catches, but one, this isn't really news, and two, I'm pretty sure every single team in the NFL has used two-back formations in OTAs. Some more coach speak about a rookie receiver. Wide receiver Keelan Doss, who was an undrafted free agent, got some praise from Coach Gruden, saying he thinks he's smart, is athletic, has size, and is going to be able to compete on special teams as well. When you're an undrafted free agent, if you don't compete on special teams, you either were completely overlooked by the entire community or you're not going to make the team. So him mentioning special teams while complimenting him isn't really too surprising. This doesn't change my value of him at all, as I do think he will need some time in order to become a complete receiver and get playing time if he ever does. Cooper Kupp, who tore his ACL last year, is on track for Week 1. The reports out of Miami say that Ryan Fitzpatrick has been better than Rosen so far in OTAs, but that Rosen has also played well. This is also kind of a non-news story because Rosen has to learn the offense and is also a second-year player. Not shocking that a multi-year veteran looks better after a few short practices when he's already been there for a few months. Most likely, Fitzpatrick has a decent chance of starting the season. I'd put it about 50-50 between him and Rosen, but Rosen will take over at some point this year, almost guaranteed. Dak Prescott said Jason Witten hasn't lost a step and has gotten better, stronger, and faster after his year off, making football games unwatchable as a commentator. He's 37 years old and will most likely be almost completely unusable in fantasy based on his lack of athleticism he showed 2 years ago. Maybe he's bigger, stronger, faster, but I think this is more just pumping up a teammate than reality. Second-year Steelers wide receiver James Washington has dropped 15 pounds. So really, he's just saying he gained too much weight last season, and now he's back to about his combine weight of 213. Maybe he's slightly smaller than that. He's a great deep ball receiver with athletic limitations, but with the opportunity in that offense and another year under his belt, combined with how much I liked him on film, I see him being fantasy relevant in redraft and Dynasty. I'm not sure about his current price right now, but I think you can probably get him cheaper with the Deontay Johnson hype going on right now. I still haven't scouted Deontay Johnson, so it's hard for me to really nail that down for sure of which receiver I'd rather have. But based on how high I had James Washington last year, I'd almost for sure rather have him than Deontay Johnson, especially now that he has a year of NFL experience under his belt. Another news story that really isn't a news story. Lamar Jackson said he's still having issues throwing the football with consistency. Well, of course he is. I mean, was anyone expecting him to all of a sudden be the most accurate passer in the NFL? No. But he most likely will be improved with the amount of NFL coaching and time he gets to put in on his mechanics. And I think we all know that throwing isn't the reason he's fantasy relevant. It's on the ground. So I'm sure his passing will be improved, but I do believe in his work ethic. I do believe in Lamar Jackson, so I find this story just kind of odd. Often injured defensive back Jimmy Ward of the 49ers broke his collarbone in Thursday's practice, and he'll miss 8 to 12 weeks. He might be able to play week 1, but it's pretty concerning when you injure yourself for a few months when you haven't even put the pads on yet. In other 49ers injury news, Nick Bosa, brother of Joey, the number 2 overall pick, will not participate in any more of the offseason program after pulling his hamstring. I'm not sure what a grade 1 pull means. I assume that's the least bad hamstring pull you could have, and it's most likely precautionary. But again, after seeing the injury issues of his brother and now pulling his hamstring almost immediately, it seems like injuries are going to be a common theme with Nick Bosa as well. In Cameron Meredith news, but really Emmanuel Butler news, the Saints wide receiver still hasn't been able to practice yet, and at this point it's almost 2 full years after his ACL tear, which is a pretty horrible sign for him to resume being effective at the NFL level. They're saying he looks healthy and good, but that is a long time for someone with an ACL tear to not even be able to practice. Mike Weber, the Cowboys running back out of Ohio State, picked in the 7th round, had a knee injury scare, which would have vaulted Tony Pollard's value up significantly, but apparently he's already back to practicing. This is just a good reminder to not really trust any of the injury reports until you've heard it from multiple sources in multiple places. When they first reported on this knee injury, they're acting like it was a season-ending injury, and it's been like 5 days and he's already back practicing. So in that backfield, I much rather prefer Tony Pollard's athleticism, pass-catching ability, and long-term upside, even though he does have some hands issues. Mike Weber would be the early down back if Zeke were to be suspended or hurt or whatever. Pollard just doesn't have the frame to be an every down back in the NFL today. Not saying it can't happen, but right now Mike Weber is the clear Zeke on the ground handcuff, in my opinion. And I did like his film more than I thought I would going into it. I knew that he had been outshined by a younger back, but he did have pretty good vision, and he's just kind of a solid all-around back. He can catch. It's not really a strength, but behind that offensive line, any of these running backs are going to be fantasy relevant if Zeke does miss time or gets hurt. The Ravens' strong safety, Tony Jefferson, formerly of the Cardinals, apparently still can't practice after having ankle surgery in January. He was supposed to be recovered in 4 to 6 weeks, so the fact that it's been 4 or 5 months is an issue. Again, any foot, ankle type scenario is usually way more difficult to come back from than most other types of injuries. It's simply the foundational aspect of your movement ability in football. The amount of internal forces on your muscles and joints and bones are pretty astronomical, really. I don't know how much you know about torque or anything related to physics, but it's just interesting the way muscles work. The amount of force they exert is pretty insane on the inside of your body just to produce a relatively weak force at the end of that moment arm or your hand. The Lions are expecting second-year player Frank Ragnow to be their center this year. As I've said before, center is the most important position to upgrade if you want to improve your run-blocking capabilities as an offensive line. They already were a pretty good run-blocking line, in my opinion, last season. And he was drafted as a center, forced to play guard, and now going back to center. And he was the 20th pick in the draft last year, so it was already odd to me why they would draft a center, play him at guard when he was your number 20 pick. But him moving back to center, I think does mean good things for this offensive line. In IDP news, Marcus Davenport, the defensive end for the Saints, who famously was traded up for last year, which a lot of people felt was a reach at the time at pick 14, is recovering from toe surgery, but expects to be back on track. I feel like the theme of today's news is to be very wary of toe and foot and ankle injuries because of the force involved and how much it affects the rest of your biomechanical chain. So this is concerning to me that he has toe surgery as a defensive end, because that's exactly how I've hurt mine, and it's probably the most important body part when you're trying to bend that edge and take your 250 pounds plus someone else's 300 pounds on that joint. So if I did have him in IDP leagues, I don't know if I'd trade him away, but I definitely temper expectations for production this year. But it's just one of those things we're going to have to wait and see. Toe injuries just concern me based on personal experience. For the Panthers, their new center they got in free agency from the Broncos, Matt Paradis, is apparently ahead of schedule. After his broken leg last season, He's had a lot of injury concerns, including double hip surgery the year before, but when he's healthy, he is one of the best centers in the NFL. As we already said earlier, the most important position to improve your run game. Him being full health will mean big things for that Panthers offensive line. Jets coach Adam Gase denied he had anything to do with the decision to fire GM Mike McGannon. Bull fucking shit. I think I've stated before, Adam Gase is full of shit. He's been a proven liar to the media many times. The timing of the GM firing is almost always a disgruntled head coach. But that's just what Gase does. He just wants to make shit up. It blows my mind how he pretends that he doesn't want anything to do with the media or drama, yet all he does is lie to the media and create drama on the teams that he coaches. When he's coming out and saying that he disagreed with the contracts from the last GM and is now saying he didn't have anything to do with the decision, it's just already a blatant lie. It just cracks me up. Let's move on to Josh Jacobs' situation on the Oakland Raiders. At wide receiver, they've got Antonio Brown, who is 31. He's a fantasy stud, no less than 154 targets, 1,284 yards, 101 catches, or 8 touchdowns since 2012. So that's 6 straight years of elite production. He's a fantastic route runner with elite quickness and athleticism. He's a huge upgrade over their wide receiver one from last year in Jordy Nelson. Last year with the Steelers, he had 168 targets, which is 11.2 per game, 104 catches, 1,297 yards, and 15 touchdowns. He averaged 13 yards per route, 8 yards per target, 13 yards per touch, and a 62% catch rate. AB has failed to play all 16 games the last 3 years in a row, but he's only missed 4 total games over that time frame. There's a lot of worry about him moving from Raplesberger as his quarterback to Derek Carr, as Big Ben did throw for over 5,100 yards and 34 touchdowns last year, but Carr has thrown for 3,900 or more in 3 of his 5 seasons. He also had his highest passing yards total last season without any adequate receivers outside of Jared Cook. Another new addition to the Raiders wide receiver core is Tyrell Williams, who is 27. He's a fairly underrated deep threat receiver who struggles with press coverage and physicality. He's been a Charger for 4 years, and he'll benefit from the extra attention that AB does get. And in his second year, he did get over 1,000 yards with 7 touchdowns. Tyrell's averages over the past 3 years are 84 targets, which is 5.3 a game, 51 catches, 813 yards, 5 touchdowns, with 16 yards per route, 10 yards per target, 16 yards per touch, and a 60% catch rate. I see him as cheap depth in Dynasty. You can probably get him fairly cheap. And he's also a late round dart throw, who I do think will be a solid producer in redraft leagues. The Raiders also added Hunter Renfrow in the draft, who will be 24. He's an unathletic slot receiver from Clemson and was drafted 149th overall in the 5th round. My wide receiver 38 pre-draft will be more valuable moving the chains for the Raiders and keeping the offense on the field than for fantasy production. The rest of their receiving group is a bunch of Jags, but the 3 they do have that should contribute are J.J. Nelson, who's a speedster formerly of the Cardinals, that will help stretch the field. They've also got Marcel Aitman, who's a second-year receiver out of Oklahoma State, who's pretty much a contested catch specialist. They've also got their undrafted free agent Keelan Doss, who we talked about a little on the news portion of today, but again, I think he has too much to learn to really be fantasy relevant or see playing time this season. The Raiders went an interesting route with the tight end position, acquiring a bunch of blockers and low upside pass catchers. They added blocker Derek Carrier and Luke Wilson. They also took Foster Moreau in the 4th round this year from LSU. He was my pre-draft tight end 9, but he did have better than I expected testing scores. I think he's probably going to be a blocker with limited receiving ability long term, and don't see him contributing too much this season regardless. They also added pass catching tight end Darren Waller from the Baltimore Ravens, who's been getting a little bit of buzz, and also pass catcher Eric Swoop from the Colts. Their strategy is clearly to throw a bunch of shit at the wall and see what sticks. I don't see anyone out of this group being fantasy relevant this season. At running back, they still have Doug Martin, who's entering his 30-year-old campaign. He was the lead ball carrier last season for the Silver and Black after the Marshawn Lynch injury. He had 172 attempts for 723 yards and 4 touchdowns, resulting in 4.2 yards per carry. In the past game, he had 24 targets for 18 catches, 116 yards, and a 75% catch rate. The injury-riddled career of the muscle hamster is likely ending soon, but he could realistically take 100 to 150 carries away from Jacobs based on his most recent career averages. The Raiders' backfield also includes 26-year-old pass catcher Jalen Richard, who grew into a solid receiving role last year with 81 targets for 68 catches and 607 yards, but did not score a touchdown through the air. He had 9 yards per route and 8 per target with an 84% catch rate. He's never had more than 83 carries on the ground, which he did as a rookie, and he has a 3-year average of 65 carries per year. He's got fumble concerns with putting the ball on the ground 8 times in 2017 and 3 times last year, but he's most likely going to remain involved in the passing game. Another somewhat intriguing name they've got is Chris Warren, who's 23 and is a second-year power back out of Texas. He led the NFL last year in preseason rushing yards, but he really doesn't do anything more than run into people fairly hard. I could see him being a goal line vulture, but more than likely he's just replacement level depth. On the whole, the Raiders' rushing attack was 25th in rush yards per game last year, which is 7th to last. Quarterback Derek Carr is 28 years old and is the former 36th overall pick of the 2014 draft. He's entering his 6th season and last year threw for 4,049 yards, 19 touchdowns with a 94 passer rating. He actually improved most of his metrics with worse receivers last year than he's normally had. He's inconsistent but smart. He's not a world beater, but he is a solid player and a good leader. I found the reports of the Raiders taking a quarterback early this year quite amusing, but for fantasy, Carr does like to spread the ball around more than target one specific player. I think most Amari Cooper owners should know this. Over his 5-year career, he averages 3,748 yards, 24 touchdowns, 11 picks, with a 63% completion percentage and 89 passer rating. The Raiders' passing offense was 18th in passing yards per game, 28th in points per game, and 16th in attempts per game, which isn't as high as I would have expected for a 4-12 team, but a large part of that was due to the strengths and weaknesses of their offensive line. They were 25th in pass pro, but 13th in creating yards for the running back, 31st in power, top 10 in 2 other run metrics, but bottom 5 in the 3rd run metric that I look at. Adding Trent Brown at right tackle from the Patriots should improve this unit slightly, as long as they can overcome the loss of left guard Kaleki Asemele. They didn't spend a draft pick on the offensive line this year, but they did add 4 undrafted free agents, and they do need their 1st round pick at left tackle last year, Colton Miller, to improve his technique if they want to see better O-line play in 2019. The offense last year was 21st in yards per drive, 27th in points per drive, 10th in time of possession per drive, which shows a commitment to running the ball early in the game, but they were 21st in run call percentage at 41% due to negative game script later in ball games. If this team does improve from its 4-12 record last year, it's going to largely be because of improvements on the defensive side of the ball. The defense was 7th to last in yards per game allowed, last in points allowed per game, 3rd to last in rushing yards allowed per game, and 19th in passing yards allowed per game. The only reason they were only 19th in passing yards allowed was largely due to the poor record and game script. The coaches did realize they need to improve the defense quickly, and they reacted in free agency by adding Colts nose tackle Jonathan Hankins, Denver middle linebacker Brandon Marshall, Bengals weak side linebacker Vontaze Burfict, and safety LaMarcus Joyner from the Rams during free agency. They also attacked the defensive side of the ball heavily in the draft, selecting Clemson defensive end Cleveland Farrell at 4th overall, Mississippi State safety Jonathan Abram in the 1st round at 27th overall, another Clemson player Trayvon Mullen, who plays corner in the 2nd round, 2 4th rounders in defensive end Max Crosby out of Eastern Michigan, and cornerback Isaiah Johnson from Houston. They also added another 7th round inside linebacker and 5 undrafted free agents. This unit is almost certain to improve on the whole compared to last year, but how much they do and avoiding injury in their aging free agents they added are going to decide how much Oakland improves in 2019. The Raiders head coach is, of course, Chucky, John Gruden, who's 56 and has 12 years of NFL head coaching experience. This will be his second year with the Raiders after his coaching comeback and his 6th overall in silver and black. He's got a career 99-93 record. I personally don't like his fake personality, and I don't think he's going to last the full 10 years of his contract, but he has made some decent moves with Mike Mayock as the new general manager, but his strategy so far has been so odd by paying for older talent while also trading away young talent in Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper. I was very happy to see both of those players leave the AFC West. I do think the Raiders are going to have a better record and be more competitive than last year, but I can't really guess how much. A lot of it depends on injuries and those new additions that they brought in free agency. Josh Jacobs, the player, was my pre-draft running back 8 and in my second tier of running backs. He's 5'10", 220 pounds with slightly over 10-inch hands and a 74.25 wingspan. He's 21.29 years old and the second youngest running back that I scouted, which is a positive. He also has a 4th highest weight divided by height, a middle of a pack span divided by height, and has the best hand size divided by height in the class. He didn't participate at all at the NFL Combine. He had 2 pro days where he ran a 4.63 40 and a 4.56 40, but there were no other test results that I could find online. Whenever there's a lack of testing numbers, it raises my uncertainty level, especially when they're not combine numbers. I will accept results when they're pro day results. I don't really fudge the numbers. I just know in the back of my head those aren't combine numbers, and I do place a much lower emphasis on athletic testing than most, especially at running back. But having almost no athletic testing numbers is pretty concerning to me. Jacobs showed some good things on film by being able to get the extra yard or two with physicality consistently. He's got a good juke move, runs nice flat routes. He will follow his blockers. He has great cuts while he's running his routes, is pretty good in pass protection, runs a nice out route, has great ball tracking skills, shows good agility at speed at the second level, and has a great feel for setting up those tacklers to miss. He hands catches, has a good burst, good awareness of when to get low when he's near the goal line, has decent vision, shows the ability to one-hand catch, has good power, is a good receiver when the play breaks down. He's got the first-round draft capital, and he has a weak depth chart in Oakland providing opportunity for touches. Clearly, he was my running back 8 in this class, which I'm sure most of you disagree with immediately, but that's due to some of the bad things and concerns I had on film when I was scouting him. He loses his balance and slips in the open field consistently. He rarely uses 2 hands on the football as a ball carrier, tries to bounce outside even when the defender has proper leverage. Leverage is something you've probably heard a lot in football. All it means is draw a line down the center of my body if I'm the running back facing the line of scrimmage. If the defender's outside of me, closer to the sideline, he's got outside leverage. If he's closer to the ball in the middle of the field, he has inside leverage. So what I mean by this is the defender is already outside of him. They've got the outside leverage, and he still tries to break it outside past him. That's just a low percentage chance of success play. He shows poor pass pro form, shows laziness on film in a lot of different areas, which is very concerning with how little he was actually on the field. I don't mind laziness at times when it's clearly a guy that's not being involved on this specific play and he's been playing the whole game. I get that people get tired and it might be an advantage for you to save some energy for the future. But when you're really not utilized very much and you're still showing laziness, that concerns me. He hesitates too much in the backfield at times. I don't think he can see the whole field or understand what he's supposed to be reading on a lot of different blocking schemes. He shows extreme laziness in some pass routes. He doesn't often select the correct running angle for maximum yardage. So this is something I think a lot of film watchers, maybe not film watchers, but your average Dynasty player isn't really paying attention to. There's an optimal path, and it's almost just kind of a feel thing of where that running back needs to aim at while he's running to split the defenders, elude the defenders, and have an optimal contact angle with that defender. And there are many times where he wastes a lot of movement because he just isn't selecting that ideal path. Almost always, he's not selecting that ideal path for maximum yardage. I doubt he's going to be able to run zone plays very well. He lacks lateral agility when it's not part of his plan. I don't think he has any special traits outside of power, and I don't like the mental traits that he displays on film. He consistently misses the cutback lane. It was open all the time, and he rarely saw it or took it. I think he decides early on in his run whether he's going to follow his blocks or cut it outside without properly reading the keys that he's supposed to read. What I mean by that is, I guess very quickly, in a man-blocking scheme, you're typically trying to find the hole closest to the center. You know the play and where it's designed to go, but you also, as a running back, have to be able to improvise. And the rule with man blocking, where you're pulling a guard or a tackle, is the hole that is immediately visible to you closest to the center based on the defender's leverage on your offensive line and blockers is the one you want to select. It's opposite in zone, usually, when you're trying to find the outside hole that's going to be open and you have to cut it upfield. I don't think he truly understands the difference between the two or how to read them. I think he just decides what he's going to do and then does it and lives with the result about half of his plays at minimum. He's inconsistent as a blocker in pass protection due to his lateral agility issues, effort, and form. I see him more as a third down back and goal line back, which I know is a weird combination, but I don't see him as a 3-down workhorse immediately. I don't see him as a 3-down workhorse for a while if he ever does become one. He did not show the ability to make low hands catches on film. There's a limited volume of film, which always concerns me because it's about sample size. If I see a guy do it 3,000 times, it makes me feel a lot better than 37 times. And again, he had no athletic testing numbers that I could find. So where should Josh Jacobs go in your rookie draft? Well, right now he's being way overdrafted due solely to opportunity and draft capital combined with the positional need of getting a starting running back that most dynasty owners feel. I would take him in the back of the first round only if absolutely necessary, due solely to the opportunity and draft capital that he possesses. But him right now going in the top 3 means I'm never going to own him. I probably won't own him on a single team, dynasty, redraft, etc. throughout his whole career. I just think the hype doesn't match up with what the film says. I get that opportunity is important, especially for running back, but he's simply unskilled in technical aspects of the position, shows inconsistent play and effort with a small sample size behind a great college O-line, low usage numbers, and no testing numbers. It's amazing to me how the combine and metrics truthers are ignoring his deficiency in that area, and also the film guys ignoring the small sample size, the great situation that he was in with that offense, team, and offensive line, and his obvious flaws on film. I do understand the draft capital and opportunity argument, which is why I would select him in the first round. But I would not touch him in the first half of rookie drafts, and that means I'm never going to own Josh Jacobs. There's just too much uncertainty and risk for me. Way too much. I find it highly unlikely that he completely takes over that backfield from Richard and Doug Martin day one, but I do believe he will lead that team in touches. Based on how I feel about the uncertainty surrounding the Raiders and my overall feelings and analysis on him as a player on film, I don't expect his value to rise at all over the coming year, and I feel it's almost a near certainty that he drops in value, especially after the draft next year. On a 4-12 team with a lot of question marks, although it probably will be improved, I just can't justify the price with what I see as a very high bust risk player. On tomorrow's episode, we're going to be going over the news from Monday and analyzing the situation and talent of running back Miles Sanders for the Eagles. Your happy song of the day is Still Counting by Volbeat, and your football song of the day is GOMD by J. Cole. The football song of the day goes out to all of the haters that provide me motivation to continue to increase the quality of my content, and I honestly find it funny. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of negativity that exists out there in the world and the amount of mental time people spend on shit they don't even care about. I'll never understand it. I think this is a very fitting football song today and one of my favorite songs in existence. Thanks to everyone listening today. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope my busy week last week didn't annoy you too much. Rest assured going forward, I'm going to have episodes stacked up, ready to be released in case I have some unforeseen events happen. You've been listening to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free.
So much trouble, it's not my fault. All this, I also lost my friends, I lost my baby. That is looking crack, only today want to change. He wanted us, so I could give it a try, well, I to feel. I'd skill the grill, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned. Eating every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry, I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now we're not friends of anything. Cause they're gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try by you and read your skin up, everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more.